Welcome to another episode of Demystifying Gay Porn. My name is Ike Grande, and if you watch gay porn, I've definitely helped you get off. Welcome to Season 3. As we get going, my first episode, very special guest, photographer, writer, pornographer, director, Bruce LaBruce. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, if a little tired.
Okay, all right, I know. It's been a crazy week. You just premiered St. Narcisse in New York City.
Yep.
It's based on your characters. It's based in the 1970s, and it's got, abuse, religion, twincest, incest, all that fun stuff. Is that just another...
Lesbians living in the woods.
Lesbians living in the woods.
Motorcycles,
Yeah.
Skinny dipping monks.
Skinny dipping monks.
Monks playing volleyball.
Is it just another day in your head?
Pretty much,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Evil grows in the dark, the sun never shines.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Who are you?
Whoa, hey.
What do you want?
I'm looking for Beatrice Beauchamp.
Do you have any papers? A birth certificate?
Irene, there's no need for that. I think I know my own son.
I took a ride out past the monastery today. It's very odd. One of the young monks there looks exactly like me.
What's the matter with you lately? You have to learn the difference between boredom and contemplation.
I have a twin.
He only takes pictures of himself. Who does that? Come with me.
It's not right. What we just did is? That's different. We're family.
First, I'd like to say I love the title of your show, Demystifying Porn.
Oh, thank you.
I think it really needs demystification.
It's giving people that are in front of the camera kind of a different look at them.
You know, I'm sure we'll get into porn. So, because I did make that transition to kind of making sexually explicit art films to industry porn, and it was a total demystification process. But before we get to that, St. Narcisse just opened at the Quad here in New York. It'll be opening at some cinemas subsequently in the subsequent weeks, like in Los Angeles and I think Chicago and Phoenix, and depending on how it does. But in terms of the film itself, I mean, it's the second film I've made in Quebec, which is the French-speaking province of Canada, and of course Montreal, as we all know, is the porn capital of the world right now.
Really? Oh my God.
And or one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where Porno Hub is based, and
I keep forgetting about that.
And that's a whole other story with the big lawsuit and everything. But and I actually made a film in Montreal for Men.com a couple of years ago, which was a collaboration with the Tom of Finland, called Service Station. So I've been into their corporate headquarters, and it is very corporate.
Yeah.
But St. Narcisse, I made a film in 2013 in Quebec called Gerontophilia, which was a movie. It's not porn. It's like an independent feature film, and it's about another taboo, intergenerational love. It's about an 18-year-old boy who has a sexual fetish for the elderly. And so he gets a job in an old folks home. But, you know, it was done with Quebec governmental financing, SODEC, and Quebec Telefilm. I kind of couldn't get any financing in English Canada because they're a little more conservative, and, you know, you can't get away with as much. In Quebec, has a very legendary cinema tradition, and it's more aligned with like European art house cinema. And so I was kind of, this film is my homage to Quebecois cinema from the 70s. And in the 70s in Quebec, a lot of the films were about family secrets from the past, ghosts from the past, coming back to haunt people. So they're kind of spooky, eerie kind of films, including incest or like a rape within a family, or, you know, all these kinds of psychosexual things, you know. And yeah, so we shot it in the style of a 70s porn film as well. Or sorry, a 70s Quebecois film. But I'd see these films on TV as a kid on CBC. CBC is like the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It's sort of Canada's BBC, you know. And
Or RPBS, right? Kind of like
no, even more.
Yeah.
It would be more like akin to like an NBC or CBS, like the biggest broadcasting platform that isn't cable. And you know, in the 70s, you would routinely see people naked, you know, full frontal on TV. And so that's when I saw these Quebecois films when I was like 12, 13 years old. And there's one with this Geneviève Bujold, who is a famous Hollywood actress, but she's from Quebec. And she was in Earthquake with Charlton Heston, for example.
Okay.
And
yeah.
and she was married to a Quebecois filmmaker named Paul Ullman, and this one film she made for him called Act of the Heart I saw on TV as a kid. And it's Donald Sutherland plays a priest who has sex with a girl from the country on the altar of the church, and then she goes to the park, douses herself with gasoline, and sets herself on fire.
Jesus.
At the end of the movie, as the credits roll. So when I saw this movie, I was like, what the hell, you know? Can I swear?
Yeah, go nuts.
What the fuck is this all about? What is this? I thought, is this porn? Is this like weird? Is it this psychosexual? Is this how adults like have sex? Is religion all about self-abnegation and perversion and, you know, and guilt? And so that's kind of the inspiration for this film in a way. And again, you know, I could be more free and explore all sorts of taboo subjects.
So all the characters were in your head.
Yeah, it's complete. It's my original story idea, but I'm very highly referential as a filmmaker. So I was also referencing American movies from that era. There's one called The Fox by Mark Rydell with Sandy Dennison. It's a lesbian movie about two lesbians living in the woods, and a straight guy comes, and woodsman comes and sort of stays with him and kind of splits them apart. And so I was referencing that, and Robert Altman's film Images, which is about a doppelganger film about a woman who keeps seeing her double. And then De Palma's films from the 70s about incest, Sisters, about Siamese twins, and Obsession, which is kind of a father-daughter incest story.
I have a question in regard to how you put together, how it works. When you say you've created these characters, do you put them together? Like, do you see the big picture immediately, or is it something that, okay, well, these would be good characters. I can put them in this. I can put them in that. Like, it develops, or do you see the big picture almost immediately?
Well, I started with the theme of twincest. So, and I was, of course, we're all aware that it's a porn genre, and which fascinates me. I've known twins growing up. You know, my best friend in university was a twin, and I knew they had a psychic connection, identical twins, and also a weird kind of sexual aspect to the relationship. And so, and then I was thinking that I would apply it to the Narcissus myth. So the film is kind of a contemporary updating of the Narcissus myth as well. So that was my basic structure. And then, like I said, then I combined it with the fox, like lesbians living in the woods, and other elements like seeing your doppelganger, which came from images. And so it just kind of falls together. That's the way the writing process for me is very mysterious. Like it just, I think of a lot of movies that for me are connected in some way, and kind of mash them all up into one narrative. But the trick to that is to then make it your own, in your own style and your own voice, and not just to copy, but to kind of integrate it all. So, yeah, that's my process. I mean, I did co-write it. I mean, it was my idea, and then I co-wrote it with a very well-known Quebecois screenwriter named Martin Girard, who's like an award-winning screenwriter in Canada, and we spent a lot of time on the script, developing it. So it started. The basic story was there in the beginning, but it went through many, many changes over the past. It took us like 4 or 5 years to actually, from starting to write it to getting it made.
Locations. The film is absolutely beautiful. I didn't get to see Gerontophilia yet, but I had seen prior work before working on LA Zombie with you. And then I had seen...
Hustler White, probably.
Well, Hustler White, of course. No Skin Off My Ass. I saw a lot of them, because the mistake I made before working with you in LA in 2009, I should have read your books before watching the movie, because it's almost like, well, it gets into your head. You know, it's one thing is to visualize, but and I love the visualization, but your words.
Well, if you want to, I mean, I have 2 books that a lot of it is diaries and shooting diaries, and as well as like social commentary and stuff like that. But one is called The Reluctant Pornographer, and one is called Porno Diaries.
I have both.
Yeah, right.
I actually, like I said to you when you walked in, I usually don't write questions down, but I was like, how often can I have Bruce LaBruce sitting down across from me? And,
but if people who are in porn or interested in getting into porn, Porno Diaries is probably kind of instructive, because it's kind of like me as an outsider getting into porn for the first time. I started out making sexually explicit art films, is what I considered them, and I was actually in them in the early 90s, so No Skin Off My Ass, Super 8.5, and I would perform sexually in the film, but we were so naive about, or I was so naive about what I was doing, like just at that time there was no video, there was no digital, it was pre-internet, so I didn't expect the film to be seen outside of Toronto, like underground art spaces and punk bars, and
or maybe here we are,
or maybe in another, in San Francisco or something, and it got on the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival circuit was really got huge around the same time around the world. So it got on there, and then my films went into international film festivals. So suddenly, this kind of very private kind of documentation of sex which I put in a narrative form, but like fictionalized form, was seen like internationally and with big audiences, and I was totally unprepared for it, and I was kind of surprised the way it changed people's perception of me as well. Like that I was kind of considered in certain circles kind of like, déclassé or kind of like, a pervert or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you had to put up with all that kind of judgment. Or people think that if you're in porn, you have no moral compass, or you are sexually available all the time, or whatever. You know.
Well, in one of your, while I was reading it, in one of your articles, you had mentioned how people said you get that from people, but also people saying that you couldn't call yourself a pornographer.
Yeah, because I was kind of caught in between the art world and the porn world. So the art world would reject me because they thought my art was too pornographic. Because I shot for porno mags for 5 years in New York. So like Honcho, Play Guy, Mandate, Inches, and over a space of 5 years, I probably did like 40 or 50 shoots, which isn't that many, but by industry standards, but it was quite a lot for me. And you know that those photos I tried to make as artistic as possible, but the editor of the magazines would go, "Oh no, this is too arty. You're going too far here." You know, in terms of concept, making it conceptual, or you know. Adding a kind of unusual element to it, and then on the flip side, the porn world always thought my porn films were too arty. They're too much. I work for porn producers, companies who would always say to me, accuse me of not being interested in the sex scenes at all. That I was more interested in the story and making a narrative and a movie with characters, and you know. Either humor or like making a political or social point or something. And so, yeah, and that persists even to this day. I mean, people want you to choose a side, right? They're
comfortable
yeah.
with either one or the other.
Yeah, but not both. And still to this day, I think there's still a glass ceiling for pornographers, you know, moving into more mainstream, the mainstream film industry, or even the mainstream art world, you know.
When you were doing zines in Canada, and did you transition to film because it was a different way to say something, or like how was that transition?
They really kind of happened at the same time, because my schizophrenia started way back from not literal schizophrenia, but my metaphorical schizophrenia started way back when I went to university for film school and intended to be a critic and an academic, but I was, you know, required to take 2 years of production, which is when I studied photography and Super 8 filmmaking, and that I got the bug at that point for filmmaking, but I never thought I would become a filmmaker because it was too complicated and expensive, technical. And so I studied with a very famous gay film critic named Robin Wood, and who was a favorite film critic of Scorsese and Godard, Truffaut, and people like that. And so I got my sort of academic training and my cultural Marxist training there, and then simultaneously I was downtown hanging out in the punk scene, and friends I had in the punk scene were making Super 8 films. And so for me, making the Super 8 films was the way that I finally sort of decided I was going to be a filmmaker, because it was such an easy technology. Like, right, it's easy to pick up a Super 8 camera and make a simple movie. So I started at the same time as doing the fanzine JDs, which is a queer punk fanzine, a queercore fanzine. I was making these Super 8 experimental films, which had pornographic content in them, as did JDs. So that was the genesis of my kind of porn career, if you want to call it that. And but also, it was very political. We were Queercore was like a critique of mainstream punk and hardcore that was very sexist and misogynist and homophobic at the time. So we were very in your face and using gay porn as a political statement, sort of thing, saying to these straight punks, like, if you're so radical, you should be able to take like a dick up the ass, right? Yeah. So
when you pretty much answered a lot of the rest of that, because I was thinking, you know, because you mentioned the reluctant pornographer, and I was going to ask if you thought you were miscategorized, but Misunderstood probably is better, or
Well, reluctant because, as I said, it was a demystificatory process when I started making. What happened was Jürgen Bruning produced my first two sexually explicit art films, and plus Hustler White, which wasn't as explicit, but it had these extreme fetish scenes in it, the stump fucking and the, this guy getting sliced up with a razor blade and all that stuff. And so those were, when I tried to make more independent films that weren't extreme and pornographic after that, there was a lot of resistance in Canada anyway, from funding agencies, because I had this reputation, right? They just thought everything I was going to make would be automatically pornographic or extreme. So so I did try to get an independent feature with a bigger budget made at that time, and unsuccessfully. And so Jürgen and I had this reputation as being pornographers, even though at that time we didn't even really consider ourselves pornographers. And we said, fuck it. Jürgen said, I'm going to open a porn company. So he created the first porn company ever in Berlin, Katzo Film. And then I made a couple of films for them, and he directed films for them. And it's kind of twisted because my character's name in Hustler White is Jürgen Anger, and then he started directing porn films under the name Jürgen Anger, because the character was half built, sort of based on him. And I made Skin Flick, my neo-Nazi porn film that was shot in London for Katzo. And his partner, who was a kind of, shall we say, somewhat unpleasant fellow, he's the one that, on the set, he was, yelling at me in front of the actors, like, you don't give a shit about porn, and you don't give a shit about the actors, and you're only trying to make, this movie, this narrative art movie, and blah, blah, blah. And, but anyway, and then Jürgen split with him and opened another porn company called Verst Film, and then that's who I directed The Raspberry Right from, which is another, and and we did two versions. So for 3 films, for Skin Flick, Skin Flick, Raspberry Reich, and LA Zombie, I made a softcore version and a hardcore version. So even the softcore versions were explicit, but shorter sex scenes that were more integrated into the narrative. And then the hardcore versions had full-on long sex scenes.
You make visual a lot of taboo and sexual fetishes and stuff. Before I get into some of them, do you do them for yourself or for a captive audience?
Which ones?
Okay, so masturbating on Mein Kampf.
Oh, that kind of thing, like the provocative extreme scenes. Well, I do have this thing with myself, which is maybe a bit juvenile, but it's kind of like competing with myself and like trying to outdo myself every time, right? So with, my first 2 films people were shocked, especially because like Nuskanov, Medicine, and Super Nav were playing at like the London Film Festival or the Toronto Film Festival, the international film festivals, like in Europe, like at big A-list festivals, and I had ass fucking in it, and blowjobs, and in that context, they were considered quite shocking, and especially at that time in the 90s, and so that was shocking, but then with Hustler White, I took it to the next level with the stump fucking, which is kind of a notorious scene. When the film premiered at Sundance, and like at least a third of the audience walked out during that scene, and it became sort of a cult film because of that and other kind of extreme scenes in the movie. And then with the follow-up, Skin Gang, I was just like, now what can I possibly do that would be more shocking than that? So I have the scene of like a neo-Nazi skinhead jerking off on a copy of Mein Kampf. And then, which for me is an obvious, critique or you know, a kind of making a point about the historical relationship between homosexuality and fascism, and you know, it's a visual metaphor for, you know, for him, is he defiling it, or is he, you know, is it the ultimate? I mean, and then I did a similar scene in Raspberry Reich where there's a blow-up poster of Che Guevara on the wall, and this left-wing radical is jerking off onto
And licking a gun, right?
licking a gun.
Yeah. So that I put under gun fetish, because that I can see people into that stuff too.
No.
Quick aside, I consciously referenced, I made a movie for Dark Alley called Trump and Dump, and it was porn, like full-on porn, but the main character jerks off on The Art of the Deal.
Oh, no.
And it was a full-on reference to you.
Oh, no, homage.
And Jurgen saw it, and he's like, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, because it played at the Berlin Film Festival, I think, in 2017.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
At the porn festival.
Yeah, at the
Yeah,
porn
yeah.
festival.
Cool.
So there's that Raspberry Reich. I put that auto zombie porn.
Yeah,
And Ellie's
that
on.
was another kind of trying to take it a step further. So I have the gut fucking scene in Auto, but Auto really has the tone more of a kind of sweet, kind of independent, almost zom-com, you know.
Before the whole zombie movement.
It was before
The new wave of.
It wasn't
like,
before. It was at the very beginning, but it was
Okay.
it was definitely one of the first zom-coms. Yeah, and now they're like.
Yeah, you can't get
really-
away from zombie
yeah.
movies.
But zom-coms in especially
Yeah.
zombie comedies. Yeah.
LA Zombie, Extraterrestrials.
But then
and-
LA Zombie pretty much, I threw down the final gauntlet because I don't know if I could ever surpass LA Zombie in terms of like shock value. You know, it's about a alien zombie who goes around LA and finds dead bodies and fucks them back to life. So the ad line of the movie is, he came to fuck the dead back to life. And you know, you were there, so you understand what a insane guerrilla kind of shoot that was, and how we managed to actually make it as good as it is. Was
I've been trying to release the behind the scenes for the longest time.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, that's basically why it's.
No,
Jurgen
I'm
was
sure
like,
it's fine. I'm sure
it's
fine.
it's actually really well done. And after reading your diary,
Yeah.
I had no idea what you were going through.
Oh, yeah.
Genuinely was, because you know, I literally, they told me pick up a camera and just record everything, and I got in everyone's face, and I got in your face at one point, and I always tell people.
Did I yell
this.
at you?
No, you gave me the finger.
Oh.
But I completely understand. But I was like, oh my god, he hates me.
Because I hardly ever yell, and but that was, I mean, you know, we didn't even have a first AD on that movie.
Yeah.
James and I did all that stuff
Well,
together.
I had
The
Rob
cinematography.
wanted me to do AD at
Yeah.
first, and then he threw me behind and said, "No, you're going to make a documentary." I was like, "I can't do both."
Right.
So yeah, that was crazy.
And I, even in the diaries, I hint at certain things that I can't really go into, but, you know, that had to do with our makeup, you know, special effects
yeah.
guy. So
Yeah.
let's just say there was some challenges there with involving, how can I put it? I'm sure he wouldn't mind, because he
I'm sure he doesn't even know.
he profusely apologized.
Oh, he
to
did?
me.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of years later, he was mortified by his behavior and really kind of, you know, he cleaned up and
Well, that's good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I bear no ill will to him, but it did make things. I mean, he's a genius at what he does. Like his analog gore effects, old school art.
Yeah.
So incredibly creative and fun, but that was a big challenge to pull that movie off. We shot it in 7 straight days, and we shot, as you know, all over LA. We went from, you know, Malibu to like Topanga Canyon to east to the LA River to Pasadena to like South Central. You know,
Yeah.
we were just all over the place. We were so ambitious.
And the funny thing is too is I was in New York helping Rob secure certain locations. We didn't even use some of them because we found better ones, and we kind of just took the scene. Like
We did.
You
We shot in the fucking LA tunnel without any permission. I mean,
yeah, we said it was going to scout.
the downtown
Just a quick
tunnel.
scout, yeah, and you guys got the scene while it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. I look back at it fondly.
Yeah.
It was.
Me
it was
too.
a
I do.
lot. It
I
was
do.
a lot of work, but it was really really cool.
Yeah.
And I think we were all like set up in LA for like 3 weeks
Yeah.
because we shot it, but we were there pre and post.
Yeah, and there was that, they rented that sort of headquarters
Yeah.
where all the porn models were staying, and
Where they came and went. Santino Rice, Tony Ward, everybody was there. It was quite an experience. Santino Rice is on the behind the scenes and has some of the funniest ad lib.
I bet.
Like it's so good. I'll send you the link just to watch it. For,
and then
for shits and giggles.
Eric Rhodes,
Yes.
as well, who
Yeah.
was such a sweetheart. I mean, just a quick story about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like he, I got for this final scene where these kind of big, muscular, pumped up porn stars are like doing a coke deal. They're having some coke delivered to them, and so we got Francesco Di Macho, who was huge at the time. That's Francois Saget's ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
And Eric Rhodes and Matthew Rush and Kevin Killian.
Adam Killian.
Adam
Yeah.
Killian, sorry. And so they were, we had one day to shoot that whole orgy scene and the slaughter scene where they all get slaughtered with guns but they none of them thought that they were actually going to have to do sex, like have actual sex, because they thought it's a LaBruce movie. We'll just be kind of like either acting or simulating sex or something. And none of them wanted to do it, mostly because they all had agents who
Or boyfriends. I think one of them said, "I can't do this. I told my boyfriend I was going to do it."
Right.
Yeah. Cut to 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
They were moaning.
No,
like-
but it was Eric. It was Eric
Was
who
it?
actually
Okay.
talked them all into it. Yeah. So I was so grateful to him for doing that.
Cool.
And he was just, he was like a gentle giant.
Yeah,
man.
he was. He was really, really nice. I think it's fresh in my head because I just watched I have it up on Vimeo private because I wanted to show Jurgen. I'll send you that link just
Sure.
to see it because
Yeah.
it's fun. It's crazy. but
It'll bring back lots of memories.
yeah,
I'm sure.
there are things in there that I completely forgot were caught. And
Oh, like the crazy lady in the donut
oh
shop?
yeah, she was great with her shark bite.
I wish I would have I wish I would have put her, actually been able to put her in the movie, but yeah.
She wouldn't sign a release for him.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you wanted to.
Well, and Jurgen's so ethical, he didn't really want to, exploit this poor crazy, schizophrenic woman.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would have no problem.
Going back to no skin off my ass for a second. In your book, you mentioned dating a skinhead hustler who hated fags, but you were in a relationship with him?
No, it started out when I met him. He was a hustler. He was my first kind of boyfriend, really. And I was in my mid-20s. And he, when I met him, he was actually quite left wing. He was like more like aligned with like new wave movement or something. And he listened to Jonathan Richman and I don't know, like James. His favorite band was James Chance and the Blacks. And
Oh, I thought you were going to say.
yeah, and we went together he was gay for pay. He had a girlfriend, but I was in love with him, and it was intense. But we dated maybe 9 months, and then a couple of years later, and then lost contact. And I ran into him a couple years later, and he had become a neo-Nazi skinhead. And I was like, "How did that happen?" And he can't be serious, and so he was kind of between apartments at that point. So I said he could come stay with me. And he stayed with me for like 3 or 4 weeks. And then I was constantly trying to joke and humiliate him out of this ridiculous, posture, political posture. And one day he just beat the shit out of me right outside my building, And so I had to kick him out, and I really didn't see him again after that. But you know what they say? He hit me, and it felt like a kiss. It's like I developed that experience. Kind of made me feel so ambivalent and about ideas of. Like I said, the relationship historically between homosexuality and fascism, just like this idea of domination and submission, and this kind of figure, this who wearing this uniform, like he wore the skinhead sort of uniform. He was always a good dresser, and just that kind of the idea that he was kind of. Somewhat brutal, kind of turned into somewhat of a brutal kind of character that really turned me on. So that's kind of the genesis of all my skinhead fetish, which persists today even in Saint Narcisse, because all the monks have shaved heads.
When you did Super 8.5, you said you were the stunt ass.
Yes.
Does that mean you got fisted?
No, I had a gun shoved up my ass.
Oh, okay. How was that?
The actor playing that role didn't want to do it, and so I substituted the continuity was totally bad because he had a hairy ass and I had a totally smooth ass. But I wrote it into the script because that movie is about a porn filmmaker. It's about a washed-up porno filmmaker who is exploited by this lesbian underground documentary filmmaker who's making a documentary about him. And he thinks that this is his big comeback, and she's just using him. And but so I wrote it into the script where that's in a film within the film, and we explain in the movie, how that about the
stunt ass,
the ass stunt ass, the ass double, yeah. But that's happened. Jürgen, I think, had to once.
I've seen stunt cocks.
Yeah, no, I think in one of Jürgen's films, that he produced, the actor couldn't get it up or something, and he ended up, or they needed a close up, and they used his dick or something.
So I have 2 questions that are a little. Well, one, you just said you have a skinhead fetish. Are you also and I mean this with all due respect, are you a masochist?
Yeah, I would say I'm on the submissive side of the, dominant and submissive equation, for sure, yeah.
Also, filmmaking? Do you consider, because that's kind of emotional masochism. Like, you get to do something you love, but it's so grueling sometimes, right?
No, but that's not something I really...
You wouldn't
take pleasure in a way. I mean,
I see.
Guerrilla filmmaking is exhilarating. It's like gonzo. It's like you get the adrenaline rush and all that stuff. But it's not because I don't enjoy being chased around by police and kind of almost having horrible car accidents and getting into dealing with divas who are out of their minds and all that stuff. I would prefer to avoid that if I could, but it goes with the territory. Basically.
Yeah, because some of the things that I was reading and some of Laszlo and some of the shit you were dealing with in the beginning, and you guys are like this, whatever. I just saw him recently, and he's an interesting character.
Oh, you mean the DP?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
because you were talking.
He was at my premiere just.
Yeah.
No, we shot like altogether. We shot, I think, 6 films together, 6 or 7. So yeah, we're very close.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to mention though about in terms of the demystification is when I did start making porn, for the first time in the more industry style with Skin Flick and Skin Gang. that's when I really realized what a fake porn is, you know, and it never really even occurred to me before that, you know, that it is a kind of craft where how to make sex look real and sort of seamless and this kind of perfect sex act or something. I mean, it depends on what kind of porn you're talking about. There's some sloppy, messy porn that can be quite hot, you know. But,
yeah, for sure.
But you know, in general, the industry standard is kind of like this. You know, people, they don't generally keep in if someone has an anal leak or if, you know, someone farts or all that stuff. And in that first movie, I was literally going, because we were so short-staffed, I would go in myself with a cloth and like wipe the anal leakage off somebody, you know, between after we stopped the take, and also just this idea of how you, I mean, it's kind of elementary, but how you know, shoot the cum shots and then the face is all like acting and all that stuff. I never really knew or even considered all that kind of stuff. So it was a kind of demystificatory process for me, and also that it's not very sexy to shoot porn usually, and that you create an illusion that it has a kind of an arc to it when quite often you that's totally manufactured or you fix it in post. Or, I mean, quite recently on a porn film I made, and I won't mention which one or who the actor I'm talking about, but he couldn't get, he had a hard on for most of the scene, but then at the end I wanted all the actors to come and he couldn't come, and so I didn't even know this trick. Apparently there's quite a few tricks.
Fake cum or?
Well, one was, so he was fucking somebody's mouth, and, you know, the guy puts this fake cum in his mouth, and so then he just thrusts, and then it all just, you know, drips out of his mouth. Or you shoot it from the side with a kind of pump that pumps it out so it looks like it's coming out of the... extreme close-up, they hold it and... Yeah. There's lots of different tricks. So, but yeah, so that's what I'm talking about, the demystification of it, you know. And then the industry itself, I call myself the reluctant pornographer because I'm so aware that there's a lot of exploitation within the porn industry, and quite often it attracts people who already have had some kind of sexual damage in the past, or you know, PTSD having to do with abuse or something. Not you know, I don't know what percentage, but I mean it exists. So you know, you really try to work with people who know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it, and
you're not wrong. It's absolutely yeah. Speaking of exploitation, one of my other questions: what does it mean to be a shameless self-promoter? And is it similar to exploitation?
Well, I don't think I'm more of a shameful self-promoter than, especially these days. I mean,
well, shameless.
Shameless.
Yeah.
When I started out, I maybe was a bit more unique in my shameless promotion.
Well, yeah, I'm quoting you in like the 90s.
Right.
Yeah. I wouldn't call you that.
Yeah, no. I thought maybe somebody else had, which they have. I mean, Dennis Cooper once said I was careering with a Jane Mansfieldian latency. So, but you know, it's so different now. I mean, back then it was like that was the punk world and the underground art world that were kind of this avant-garde kind of world was underground. It was like, it wasn't, there was no social media, there was no internet, so it wasn't governed by corporate platforms or interests or monetization or any of that stuff. It was like all do it yourself. And so you had to be really creative to promote yourself and to get your product out, and so part of it was like doing kind of what everyone does now, which is creating a persona and pumping it up and making it into a kind of spectacle and shocking people and drawing attention to yourself. But at that time, fame wasn't the monster that it is now. I mean, to be famous in an underground context was cooler than to be, a Hollywood celebrity, Now everyone just wants to be as famous as they possibly can and as rich as they possibly can. That's everyone's goal now, which I find disgusting and boring. But at that time, it was just like, it wasn't about getting rich. It wasn't about being like famous in that kind of phony celebrity Hollywood way. It was like just being more notorious in the underground or something, So it was a little more pure and a little less like completely ego-driven, and So back then being a shameless self-promoter meant something a bit different. Now pretty much everyone's a shameless self-promoter.
You mentioned Queercore before. Where is Queercore now?
Well, there's a documentary that just came out called Queercore, How to Punk a Revolution, that I'm in as an interviewee. It still exists. I'm not really... the punk scenes and circuit or whatever still exists, but I haven't been really involved in it like directly for a long time. I still consider my work to have a punk ethos or a punk strategy, that I use punk strategies. And by the way, I think Trump, was kind of a punk. He used kind of punk strategies because, he knew how to use political incorrectness and kind of how to... I mean, I used to say, in the 90s, I try to contradict myself at least once a day, And he took that, to the 100th. He contradicts himself once every 2 minutes.
I never thought about that. Anyway, he was as lovable as you are. He would have been a different person,
Well, actually, the Russian equivalent of the Wall Street Journal, about 3 or 4 years ago, called me the Trump of the gay underground or something.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd you like that?
I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nostalgia about it now because it was a really cool scene and there was a really cool bands and everything. People kind of, I think, tend to forget that there was a lot of also melodrama and crazy feuds and all kinds of stuff happening as well. But yeah, I look at it fondly, but it's not something that I try to move on and like I said, I maintain the punk ethos, but it's not like a scene that I'm involved in directly.
Mm-hmm. With that, you have new generations or generations of filmmakers now that are influenced by you. How does that make you feel?
Well, the most gratifying thing is on Instagram or wherever, or even running into people on the street. I can't tell you how many people tell me, that my films from the 90s gave them permission to be gay or queer, or gave them permission to do porn for the first, or to make porn, mm-hmm. or gave them permission to, be a nonconformist gay, or they lost their virginity watching one of my movies, or they broke up with their first boyfriend because he didn't like my movies, or whatever. People tell me that all the time. They used to take their boyfriend or girlfriend to my movies as a test, and if they flunked the test, then they would dump them. So yeah, but
you blew some minds. I brought 3 friends with me, and Annie's boyfriend, you blew his mind, and I was like, oh, this is nothing. I was like, you haven't even seen anything yet.
Yeah. So I mean, it's it is what it is.
I'd like to ask you about a word. You said queer just recently. Interesting relationship with the word, would you say? Because it's huge now.
Yeah. Well, I think people just got tired of the alphabet soup of, LGBTQ plus forever, And queer is just like a short form in a way for that. But I mean, I've gone through so many eras of when it was cool to use the word, when it wasn't, when it meant something more mainstream, when it meant something more underground, when it meant something more old school, new school. I mean, so now I think it's one of those words that's kind of almost played out, but it's beyond that. I mean, for me, I mean, I think we're post-gay now. I think we're really in a post-gay era, as you know. So Narcisse isn't really about gay characters at all. Except, I mean, even the lesbian characters are, have had relationships with men or do have relationships with men, and the gay characters have relationships with women. And I mean, one of the funny things is I'm making a porn next month for Erica Lust, a feature porn film, and it's kind of bisexual, and because Erica Lust is a Barcelona-based feminist ethical porn company that's more on the straight side, and porn was always about straight guys who were gay for pay. So there was tons of straight guys doing gay porn and they would, we all know, and they would usually bottom, so they wouldn't have to worry about getting it up, right? So, and
mind blowing.
Yeah, I know, but it was super common. I think it was even more common in the 80s and 90s, maybe.
Oh, really? Right. I've absolutely seen, and they go and do straight porn after that.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Stryker was the biggest kind of most famous example.
I'm thinking of Peter North, for instance. Wasn't he like a big old bottom, and then eventually, like, he was huge in the 90s in straight porn. I grew up on that, so.
Yeah. But now, the last few films I've made for Lust, and I've run into quite a few gay guys who are almost straight for pay. They're doing scenes with girls, or trans girls, or girls in general. But they're primarily gay in their identification, but they're having sex with women in porn, which is kind of a nice, interesting reversal and kind of a sign of the times.
Yeah. I see a lot of bi porn as well, and I see a lot of models that I've worked with in Vegas, especially working with Biphoria and a whole bunch of other studios.
And I run into gay, gays from a young, much like, what do you call them? Gen Z and Gen Z minus or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Who say, I don't identify as gay anymore, I'm bi or I'm poly or so. I mean, it really is a completely new landscape. Yeah.
With that new landscape, does Bruce LaBruce have to watch his mouth ever?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not so afraid of being canceled because I'm not. Canceling is usually you have to be, you have to be really quite famous and kind of rich before anyone will bother to cancel you, and I've canceled myself so many times that. So it's not that, but you still, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I guess with the Me Too movement starting and everything, there was this feeling that you had to watch every word that came out of your mouth, and I know a lot of people feel that even not only online, but in social contexts.
You gotta watch what you said 20 years ago at a point.
Did we?
I've seen people get canceled for tweets 10 years ago, and
Oh, now you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, for sure. Oh no, absolutely. It's like something you tweeted when you were like, if you're 23 now. Like, it wasn't the editor of Teen Vogue, I think, was like fired because she tweeted something in high school that was construed as anti-Asian or something. But
oh yeah, yeah.
yeah. But so when that all started happening, I did feel like I was either being quite careful about what I tweeted, or I wasn't, and I wasn't tweeting nearly as much. But I've kind of gotten over that now. Everyone knows that you don't say everything that comes into your head. I mean, you filter yourself all the time in your own head, you know, and so you just have to be smart about it and know when you can joke about things. And the trick is, and it's all about comedy, because I'm a bit of a comedian as well, and it's all about knowing how to frame the joke and how to make it land properly, and so it's a skill to do it, but you can I think you're starting to be able to get away with things again more.
I follow you on Instagram, and you write a lot in the book about stars that you grew up admiring. And you have mentioned a couple, like Tom Hardy, I think you just wished him a happy birthday and stuff. But who?
No, I don't really wish people happy birthday to wish them happy birthday. I post shirtless photos of them to get more hits and likes. No, I'm kind of like the Kenneth. I try to be like the new Kenneth Anger, just like exploiting Hollywood, almost using it as porn, or like I only post shirtless pics.
I didn't. Okay.
Of
I'll take note of that.
Almost always.
Yeah.
So Tom Hardy I like, but he's not like he's not like my favorite actor.
Yeah. Okay.
And my frames of reference are all more like 70s and 80s in terms of the ones that, and also classical Hollywood. I mean, I'm a huge cinephile and European cinema and from the 70s and 60s. So yeah, that's.
I just got into your chapter on. Did you call yourself Judy or Bruce Garland? I think or Judy
LaBruce.
Yeah, just got into that. And I have a lot of like the movie with Renee Zellweger and stuff. I have that.
I refuse.
Yeah, no, it's not good. Okay.
No, I refuse to watch it.
Oh, okay.
Just as I refuse to watch the remake of The Boys in the Band. Like to me, those Judy Garland original Boys in the Band, they're like sacred things that I don't want to see modern trivializations of them.
What about the documentary? You said you mentioned there was a documentary of the show that Judy got her last show. Is that something worth watching?
No, I think what I was talking about is her last film.
Right?
No, the last film she appeared in is called I Could Go On Singing, and she pretty much plays a character based on herself. It's with Dirk Bogarde, who's one of the great gay icons of cinema in the last 70 years, and yeah, it's just a great movie. I mean, that's an old school thing, but that's complicated too because my friend Glenn Belverio, he used to have a show called Glenda and Friends on Manhattan Basic Cable, but it was kind of a cult show, and that's the only time I've ever done drag was for his show, and I would dress up kind of like Judy Garland or Eliza Minnelli on a bad day, or like the day before she died on a toilet or whatever. Because Judy Garland died on a toilet. But but even back in the 90s, we did this thing called the post-queer tour of New York, and everything was about queer nation and progressive activism and everything, and we were trying to bring back old school gay, like pre-liberation gay, even in the 90s. Or we did a show where we dressed in drag and went to this organization that was doing gay conversion therapy, and we went in drag and asked them to help us convert to heterosexuality.
Wow.
Yeah, it's old school stuff. For me, there's kind of a very sincere attachment to it, like classic Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard, Gloria Swanson, all that kind of stuff. Hustler White is partly a remake of Sunset Boulevard. So it's a genuine attachment, but I also have that Kenneth Anger thing where he likes to dig into all the dirt and the tragedy and the dirty underbelly of Hollywood and all the scandals and what really happened. Like the Scotty Bowers documentary, where it's about a hustler who pimped out for a lot of the great classical.
Oh, wow, that was a great movie.
Yeah.
But he was a straight guy, though, right? He was living
No,
with...
he was bi.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
he was totally bi.
not at the end, I think.
No, he was. I mean, when the documentary, he just died. But after that, but in his 90s, yeah, he ended up with a woman. But I mean,
he had like a black book, though, right, or something like that's how.
Oh, beyond that, I mean, he worked at the service station, and he rented 3 kind of camper kind of trailers, and he would have the Hollywood stars who would come in to fill up with gas. He would like have them. There'd be a hustler waiting in one of these. One of these trailers, and it's everyone from Rock Hudson, Spencer Tracy, what's his name? George Cukor, like directors, famous directors and whatnot. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm really into the movies on a pure kind of cinephile level and on an emotional level, but also I like the dirt as well, and that's what kind of the old school gay sensibility is all about. And then when I mixed that with punk, then it was a complete contradiction, which was sort of one of the earmarks of my work.
I feel like I can ask you this, and you may have an answer. The world gets more and more commercially claustrophobic. What do you do?
Well, by commercially claustrophobic, do you mean like corporatized or?
Well, a little bit of all of it. Like, it's almost like you can't go anywhere without seeing a Marvel movie. You can't go anywhere without being just
I think it's a
bombarded.
disaster. I think it's a total disaster.
But where do you turn? Where do you...
Because I think entertainment and film now is just a narcotic, and there's way too much of it, and there's way too much product. There's more people now, I think, working in the entertainment industry than not working in the entertainment industry. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's just churning out all this product. And fame is, as we're all predicted, just kind of like cheap. Like anyone can become famous and or go viral, and the pressure now as a filmmaker, for me as an independent filmmaker, is to do television, or like to do something to try to get something made on, whatever platform, Hulu or HBO or whatever, Netflix. And, I don't even think those are directors' mediums a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. They're like writers and showrunners. And I think a lot of filmmakers get sucked into it, and then they stop making kind of their own sort of personal art or cinema. I'm still more attuned to the model of European art house cinema and making movies, which is why it was so amazing to be able to show my film at the Quad, in front of an audience. And yeah, I mean, I'm more about. I would even consider making more experimental and formalist movies again, because I think that's kind of disappearing, the avant-garde, the great tradition of the avant-garde. But I've always made my films in the tradition of the gay avant-garde. Mm-hmm. So John Waters and Kenneth Anger and the great art porn directors, Wakefield Poole and Peter Jerome, and Peter Berlin and Fred Halstead, and but also the Cucho brothers or Kurt McDowell, or going way back, right back to Genet and then Fassbinder, and so that's the tradition that I think is kind of getting lost, and but I'm trying to figure out a way to keep doing it.
Jesus. All right. I took up a lot of your time. I absolutely appreciate it. For everybody listening, St. Narcisse, brand new film. It's going to be playing in New York City. It's going to be playing. It's at the Quad Cinema exclusive.
Well, it is now, but
Okay.
by the time this podcast, it'll be gone. But it'll be playing at other cities.
Okay.
In the States.
Website.
My website.
Well, they would just Google St. Narcisse.
St. Narcisse. It's just in the U.S. It's distributed by Film Movement. So if you just go to the Film Movement website, you can. Or my international sales agent is Best Friends Forever, and it's still playing at festivals around the world. And
Oh my God, Bruce LaBruce, photographer, director, writer, pornographer. Bruce LaBruce, I absolutely appreciate
Bon
you being
vivant.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate you doing this. My name is ckingBruce. You've been listening to Demystifying Gay Porn. It's available on Spotify and YouTube, wherever you can get your podcasts. And if you watch gay porn, I've definitely helped you get off. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks.